Krystal Everdeen, and today I'm going to show you how I crocheted a Hogwarts-inspired scarf, particularly a Slytherin-inspired scarf for those Slytherins out there. I recently shared a tutorial on how to make a Gryffindor-inspired scarf, but many people in the comments are like, what about my Hogwarts house? So you know what? I figured I'll do a scarf tutorial for each and every Hogwarts house, even though the instructions are the same, but still, they all get their dedicated crochet video. Alrighty then, let's get started. So the materials that you will need include green yarn as well as gray yarn, because the Slytherin colors are green and gray. Mine are size 4, 100% acrylic, but of course you can use whatever yarn that you like. And I am also using a size 5mm hook. And the first thing that you're going to do is grab the green yarn and you're going to make a slip knot. And after you've created that slip knot, you're going to put your hook in the loop and you're going to chain 20 chains. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And that's going to be the base of your scarf. This is how wide your scarf is going to be. If you want a thicker scarf, then just chain more. If you want it thinner, then just chain less and continue on from there. But for me, I'm going to chain 20 and create my scarf with 20 chains, and that's how wide it's going to be. So after you created your chain, we're going to now do the Tunisian knit stitch. So it is a crochet stitch that looks like a knit stitch. And to do the Tunisian knit stitch, you need to put your hook through the stitch, then yarn over, bring it back through the stitch, and just leave the loop on your hook. So you're going to put your hook through the stitch, yarn over, bring it back through the stitch, and then just leave the loop on your hook. So through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, then leave the loop on your hook. So through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, leave the loop on your hook. Through the stitch, yarn over, back through a stitch, leave the loop on your hook. And you're going to do this throughout the entire chain, and all the loops are going to remain on your hook. That's very important and very essential for the Tunisian knit stitch. You're going to be doing this pretty much the entire time. So although it may seem weird to us crocheters to do this knit stitch, because again it's very familiar to knitting as opposed to crochet, it looks really, really nice. So believe me when I say that the Tunisian knit stitch, when it comes to crocheting a scarf, is definitely my favorite, because it looks and feels so much better than any other crochet stitch that I've ever used for a scarf or clothing for that matter. So yeah, now that I've reached the end of the chain here, this is what it looks like. All the loops are on my hook and it fits perfectly. Again, I started off the project with 20 chains, so it fits nice and snugly, or rather perfectly, on my hook. So from here, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to yarn over and go through 2 loops. Then I'm going to go ahead and yarn over and go through only 2 loops. Yarn over, go through 2 loops. Yarn over, go through 2 loops. Yarn over, go through 2 loops. This is what the stitch should look like so far. I know it looks a little bit strange at the moment, but in the end it will look much better. And again, this is only the first row. When it's all put together and when you crochet on top of it, it's going to look amazing. So again, you're going to yarn over, go through 2 loops, 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 and yarn over, go through 2 loops, then finally yarn over and the last 2 loops. Now it looks a little bit better, even though it's like the first row. So this is what your project should look like so far with the Tunisian knit stitch. So to go back on this stitch, you're going to go through these stitches right here that kind of look like little V's, these little loops right here. You're going to open them up, and there's going to be this opening in between, and you're going to put your hook through that. Then you're going to yarn over, pull it back through that stitch, and it should look something like this. And again, you're going to go into the next stitch. See, there's different openings here. So there's the opening in between where I'm telling you to go, and that's where you're not supposed to go. You're supposed to go inside of the stitch right here. So this little opening right here. I made that mistake before when I was learning the Tunisian knit stitch. I was like, why isn't it looking the right way? It's because I wasn't actually going into the stitch. I was going into that opening in between the stitch. Or not in between the stitch, but in between the two stitches. But we need to go into the opening that's actually in between the actual stitch. So you're going to go through there, you're going to yarn over, then bring the crochet, then bring the yarn, then bring the loop onto your hook. So through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, and keep the loop on your hook. Then through the next stitch, yarn over, back through, keep the loop on your hook. Through the next stitch, yarn over, keep the loop on your hook, and so on and so forth. Make sure that your stitches are not too tight, otherwise it's going to wrap around your hook again, far too tight, and it will be difficult for you to continue with this stitch because you're going to have to be going through those stitches, and if they're too tight, you're going to find yourself struggling to be able to find the openings to them. So just make sure that you're not doing it too tight, but also don't make them too loose either, because then your stitches are going to be all uneven and it's not going to look nice. So here I am going into the very last stitch here, and here are all of the loops on my hook, and it's going to look very bunched up in the beginning, but as you build on top of it, it's going to look much better and much flatter and smoother. But here it is right now. This is what my project looks like. So if your project looks something like this, do not worry. Okay, so now we are at the end, and we're just going to repeat pretty much what I already showed you. So once we're at the end here, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to yarn over and go through 2 loops. Then we're going to yarn over and go through 2 loops, yarn over, go through 2 loops, yarn over, go through 2 loops, yarn over 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 through 2 loops, and so on and so forth, making sure that you don't accidentally drop all of the stitches from your hook, because that has happened to me before. So yeah, again, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through those last 2 loops. So this is what the project looks like so far, and again, what I already showed you. Now we're going to continue on with that pattern. So we're going to find the opening within that stitch here, and we're going to go through it, and then we're going to yarn over, go back through the stitch, go through that stitch, yarn over, go back through the stitch, and leave the loop on the hook. Then go through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, leave the loop on the hook, yarn over, back through the stitch, leave the loop on the hook, yarn over through the stitch, back through the stitch, loop on the hook, yarn over, then leave the loop on the hook, through the stitch, yarn over, leave the loop on the hook, and so on and so forth. And again, the beginning of this project is probably the most difficult part because it bunches together on your hook, and it's difficult to hold. But once it gets bigger, I know it sounds strange because you would think that the more fabric it has, the more difficult it would be to keep on your hook. But the more rows you create, the easier it is to just keep everything together. So I just reached the end of the row, but instead of extending my project, I'm just going to leave it bunched up because it's easier for me. And then I'm going to chain 1 here, and then yarn over and go through the last, not the last 2 loops. Go through 2 loops, yarn over, through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, and so on and so forth until I reach the very end of the row. And then I'm just going to repeat that process for a number of rows until I'm happy with the size of the green portion of the scarf. Now we're going to be doing this in blocks, so we're going to make a green block first, and then we're going to add 2 silver or gray stripes to add the second color of the Slytherin colors, because Slytherin is green and silver, or green and gray. So we're first going to make a little square of green, and then we're going to go ahead and add the gray. And I'll show you how to do that once I'm finished with the block of green here. So again, now that we have reached this side of the project, we're going to go back on it by going through the stitch, yarning over, then going back through, and then leaving that loop on the hook. So then going through the stitch, yarning over, leaving that loop on the hook, going through the stitch, yarning over, leaving that loop on the hook, then going through the stitch, yarning over, leaving that loop on the hook, and so on and so forth. You already know the drill here. So again, this is what the project looks like so far, with only a couple rows into it. This is the front part, which I really like. It looks very it looks knitted, which is what I was going for. And in the back, it looks more like the purl stitch from knitting as well. But I really like this stitch, particularly because of the way it looks right here. But yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do. So you're gonna go through the stitch, yarn over, back through, leave the loop on the hook, and you're going to do that to the end. And then once you reach the end, again, you're going to chain 1, then go through 2 loops at a time. So 17 rows later, this is what my block of green looks like. And I'm just going to continue with that pattern. Every time I make a block of green, it's going to be 17 rows. Last time I made a Hogwarts scarf, I did not count the number of rows that I made per block, and some of them were uneven. So I would suggest that this time you do count the number of rows that you make. That way all of your blocks are even. So now that I'm happy with the size of the square, I'm going to add my second color, which is gray. And what I do to change the color is I grab my second color and then I bring it on to the hook, just as though it was the hook of my original color. Just as though it was the yarn from the yarn ball. But now I'm going to use that new color and then just continue on the exact same path as I would if I were just using the original color. So I just go into the next stitch and continue doing the same pattern as I normally would if I never changed colors. And that's how I add a new color. I don't know if you like to cut the yarn from the yarn ball and then tie a knot, or if you like to use the magic knot or something like that. I don't know. There's other methods that I've heard of, but I don't know of. But that's pretty much how I change colors. So after I've switched colors from green to gray, I simply continued on with the pattern by going into the stitch, yarning over, going back through a stitch, and then keeping the loop on the hook. And once I've reached the end of the row here, I'm going to make sure they go into the very last stitch. And after I do that, the project looks something like this, where I have all the gray yarn on the hook. And then I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go through 2 loops. So yarn over through 2 loops, 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 and so on and so forth until I reach the very end of the row. Now again, these stripes are going to be way thinner than the blocks that we're making. So you can decide whether or not you'd like to do 1 row of the second color, or if you would like to do 2 rows per stripe. I feel like 1 row is too thin, so I am going to make 2 rows of green per stripe. And when I mean per stripe, so I'm going to make 4 gray rows in total. So this is only 1 row, but I'm not done with the actual stripe yet because again I want to make 2 rows in order for it to like really stand out. So this is what the first row looks like with the gray, and now we're going to go back on it by doing the exact same thing. Oop, making sure that you don't accidentally get the green back in there, just the gray. And then I'm going to go into the next stitch right here, and then put that on the hook, and then go into the next stitch and put it on the hook. Make sure that it stays on the hook. And then again, once I reach the end of this row, I'm going to go back on it by simply going through 2 loops at a time. And I don't know what's going on with this yarn, but it's like falling apart and it's making my hook get stuck in between. But yeah, anyway, so I'm just going to continue with this row until I reach the very end. And once I reach the very end, I'm going to do the exact same thing I always do, chain 1 at the very end. Even though this is a Tunisian knit stitch, I still like to chain 1 like a normal crochet project, just to keep the sides even. I don't know, like if you're actually knitting, do you still somehow chain 1 with your knitting needles? I don't know. But yeah, so this is the very end of the row, the very last stitch, and I'm going to chain 1, then I'm going to go through 2 loops, then put my yarn over through 2 loops, 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 yarn over through 2 loops. I know that gets really repetitive, but for you beginners out there, I guess repetition is key, right? So yarn over through 2 loops, 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 yarn over through 2 loops. That did not go through the second loop, so here we go. Yarn over through 2 loops, 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 yarn over through the last 2 loops. Yeah, and that's what your 2 rows of gray look like. And now we're going to add in the green again. So I never cut the yarn from my yarn ball because I knew that I was going to add the green again pretty much immediately after. So I'm going to do the exact same thing I did when I added the green. I'm just going to put the color on the hook as I normally would if I were just using the gray. So I'm going to go into the stitch. Did I skip a stitch? I did not mean to skip a stitch. There we go. And I'm just going to go into the next stitch I need to with only the green. Then the next stitch with the green yarn again. Next stitch with the green yarn. So if you ended up cutting the green yarn from the yarn ball when you added the gray, then you're just going to need to cut the gray yarn out of the yarn or from the yarn ball and reattach the green. But I would suggest that you just don't cut the yarn from the yarn ball, and you instead just leave them attached and just switch them out whenever you need them. That way you don't have to worry about like ugly knots or it unraveling in the future because you never cut the yarn from the yarn ball. So yeah, I'm actually going to go ahead and add 2 rows of green here. Again, just following the same exact pattern as we always do. And then after I add 2 rows of this green again as a spacer in between the gray stripes, then I'm going to add the gray again and make another stripe. And the stripe is going to consist of 2 rows of gray yarn. So yeah, now that I'm over here, I'm just going to yarn over and go through 2 loops until I reach the very end. And as always, once I reach the very end, I'm going to work my way back, making sure that I leave the loops on my hook. And then once I reach the end of that row, I'm going to do the same thing I'm doing right now and go through 2 loops at a time, then add the gray and make 2 rows of gray for the stripe, and then work on the green chunk again, or the green block again. So I will check back in with you after I'm done with the stripes. So right here I made 2 rows of the green, and then I added the gray again, and then I made a row of the gray. So now I'm going to work on my second row. Again, I want to make 2 rows of each whenever I make these stripes, because I think that 1 row of the color is too thin and you won't really be able to see it when you wear it. So I highly suggest that you make 2 rows of each color. So 2 rows of the gray, then 2 rows of the green in between, the green in between, and then again 2 rows of gray on top of it. And after you've created your 2 stripes, again consisting of 2 rows of each color, then you pretty much repeat the process and you make another block of green. And again, you can make these however you want, really. If you want to make 1 row of these stripes, or if you want to make 5 rows, you really want to make like these like really thick stripes or something, totally up to you. But I'm just letting you know what I did, just in case you want to make a scarf that looks pretty much exactly like mine. Again, I made 17 rows for the green block, and then after I made my 17 rows of green, then I switched the color from green to gray, and I made 2 rows of the gray. Then I re-added the green, and I made 2 rows of green. Then I added the gray back, and I made 2 rows of gray. And after I make 2 rows of gray here, I'm about to finish my second row of gray. Then I'm going to re-add my green yarn and then start my 17 rows of green again. So yeah, that's pretty much the pattern here. So you're going to do your rows of green. Mine are 17 rows, but I'm just going to call it a block. So I'm going to do my block of green, then my 2 rows of gray, then my 2 rows of green, then my 2 rows of gray again, and then another block of green consisting of 17 rows. And then after I've created 17 rows of green, then I'm going to go ahead and switch the colors back to gray and make my 2 stripes again right here. So gray, then green, then gray, and then another block of green, and so on and so forth. And you're just going to continue with that pattern for a very long time until you are happy with the length of your scarf. So again, I am now working on the block portion of the scarf. So I made my 2 stripes right here, and then I'm going to make this block again right here, and then I'm going to go ahead and make the 2 stripes, and then another block, and then the 2 stripes, and then another block, and eventually it's going to be a very, very long scarf. But yeah, it's pretty much the entire tutorial of how to make this. Once you get those steps down, then you're good. So I will see you once the project is more complete. Yeah. So this is what the project looks like after a number of rows. So this was my first block that I made, and then where I showed you me making 2 stripes, and then another chunk of green, and then I made my 2 stripes and another chunk of green, and now I'm working on well, actually I just finished the 2 stripes, and now I'm going to reattach the green and continue on making my next green block. So yeah, that's again pretty much all you have to do for the rest of the project. Just continue with this pattern using the Tunisian knit stitch, and then while using the Tunisian knit stitch, you're going to make 17 rows of green, or with the green, to make the block, And then after you've completed 17 rows, then you switch the color to gray and you make 2 rows of gray. Now, what I mean by row is actually there and back. So this is only half of a row. Now, this is something I may be just making up right now. I don't know if it's actually like considered this, but for me, what I consider a row is there and back. So I'm going to reach the left side right here, and that would normally be considered a row in normal crochet, but because I feel like you don't actually complete the Tunisian knit stitch unless you actually go back on it, then I consider that a row. So I'm going to chain 1 here, then I'm going to go through 2 loops at a time, and then when I make my way back and I've completed this stitch, then I consider it a row. Does that make sense? I hope that's not confusing. Because yeah, normally in crochet, if you complete a row, even if you're going this way, that's 1 row, and then you go back, that's 2 rows and 3 rows and so on and so forth. But for this, since you don't actually complete the stitch until you go back to the right side, then that's what I consider a row. So I guess everything has to be doubled when you're counting it. Oh my gosh, you know what? If that confused you, just disregard what I just said. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that after I complete this, like I go back to my right side, then I've completed 1 row. So I've just completed 1 row for the green block. See, there's 1 row right here. So again, the stripes are consisted of 2 rows of gray, and then 2 rows of green, and then 2 rows of gray, followed by a green block, which is 17 rows of green. Yeah, so you're just going to continue with that pattern until you're happy with the length. This is my length so far. I only have 3 sets of the stripes, and when I made my Gryffindor scarf, I believe I had 9 sets of stripes. So after I complete 9 of these, then I'll probably be done, and then we could add some tassels to make it really, really cute. And yeah, again, I'm just going to be doing the same thing over and over again with this pattern, completing my block, and then adding the stripes, and then completing another block, and then adding the stripes, and so on and so forth, until finally I'm happy with the length. Hello, I am back like 2 hours later, and I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 stripes in total, and this is what it looks like. But again, if you want to make it longer than mine, if you want to make it shorter than mine, then it's totally up to you. But yeah, this is what the scarf looks like so far, and a little, I guess, less than halfway done here. But yeah, I'm just following the same steps that I shared with you, and I'm going to continue on making my chunk of green, then my gray stripe, then a stripe of green to separate the 2 gray stripes, and another gray stripe, and then now a chunk of green, gray stripe, little stripe of green, gray stripe, chunk of green, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's pretty much the pattern, and this is what it looks like right now. Now I'm pretty much going to double it and then add 1 more, and then I'll be done with the scarf, and then I'm going to add some tassels. So yeah, next time I see you, I'll be done with the scarf. Okay, so 2 days later, I am completely done with the scarf. These scarves take me a really long time to make, so I had to like take breaks and stuff in between. That's why it took me 2 days. But yeah, this is the entire fully crocheted scarf. Again, it's a total of, I guess, 9 repeats because there's 9 stripes throughout the entire scarf. And I think it came out really, really cute. So you can either just leave the scarf as it is and just wear it like this, or you can add some tassels. Personally, I like the tassels, so I'm going to show you how I add them. So you can do this a different number of ways. You can either make these tassels with both the colors, green and gray, or you could just make green tassels, or you can just make gray tassels. I think it would be cute if I did a mixture of the green and gray for the tassels. And how I do that is I hold the yarn in my hand like this, and then I kind of spread my fingers out as wide as I can so I can wrap around my fingers very loosely so that I make a loop about, that's too big, about this size. Again, I kind of have small hands, so I don't know exactly how to measure this out. But however long you want the tassels to be, that's how long you want your loop to go down to. So I think about that long is good. So you just try to make them as even as possible every time. And again, I wanted the mixture of the gray and the green, so that's why I am holding both of the colors in my hand as I know. Hold on, I gotta make it even. Okay, as I wrap it around my hand loosely, and then I kind of like tug on it to make sure that it's the same. They're all the same size, or at least roughly the same size. It's okay if there's some of them that are more loose or more tight. You could just even it out at the end. So yeah, it's just like kind of like a glob right here. I don't want to make it too thick because then it looks weird. So about, what is this? I don't know how to measure it out, but it should look something like this. And then I'm going to cut the yarn from the yarn ball, and you're left with this kind of messy loop. And after that, you're going to go straight down the loop, give it a cut, and everything is going to be in even more disarray. So it's just a bunch of strips of yarn like this. You're going to hold it as evenly as possible. Again, for the most part, it is uneven, but I'll even it out later. And you're going to grab your scarf, grab your hook. Where's my hook? And then figure out where you would like to attach your tassel. So I would like to attach my tassel probably in this second stitch right here. And then I'm going to bring the center of these strips of yarn through the loop. Sometimes I'm able to do it with my hook. Oh, sweet. And sometimes it doesn't work and I have to do it with my fingers, and that's okay. And then after you bring that center of all of these strips of yarn through, then you're going to go through that loop that you've created, and you're going to bring the rest of the yarn through like this, and then you're going to give it a tug like so, and you've attached your tassel. Cute! Again, I really like the way it looks with the mixture of the gray and green with this color scarf. So yeah, and then you're going to do that. You're just going to repeat it throughout the entire scarf. So just make some more tassels and then attach it here, then maybe attach it here and then here. Try to make it even, and then you should be done. Oh yes, actually in the end, then you're going to cut the bottom of the tassel to make it even, unless you like the look of this. But then you're also going to flip the scarf over and then also trim out all of the excess yarn whenever you cut the yarn from the yarn ball when you change the colors. And then after that, then you'll truly be done. I mean, of course, besides attaching the tassels not only to this side, but also the other side as well, so that they're nice and even. So yeah, after that, then you're completely done with the scarf. And this is what the project looks like after attaching the tassels. So again, I attached them to both sides, of course, and I really like that I went with the green and gray combination. But of course, if you just want to do one solid color, just green or just gray, I'm sure it's going to look fantastic as well. And yeah, that's pretty much how you crochet a Hogwarts inspired scarf, specifically a Slytherin inspired scarf. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up before you go, and also check out the other crochet tutorials that I have on my channel. I have so many of them that I'm sure you will love. And again, I will be linking the Crocheting for Beginners video in the description box below. Don't forget to click that red subscribe button if you have not already, so I can see you next time. Bye! And have a magical day.